Welcome to Markets Plus, where leading experts from across BMO discuss factors shaping the markets, economy, industry sectors, and much more. Visit bmocm.com/Markets Plus for more episodes.
This is Journeys to Growing the Good on Markets Plus, featuring intimate and inspiring conversations with visionary leaders, where we uncover their unique personal stories, strategies, and passions that motivate them to boldly grow the good in business and life. I'm your host, Issam Majeed. Every day, all of us face the same modern dilemma. We want to eat healthier, but we also want snacks that don't taste like punishment. We want convenience, but not the kind that comes with a side of guilt. And in the middle of this global tug-of-war between our taste buds and our better judgment stands today's guest. Yousuf Soliman is the CEO of two fast-growing e-commerce businesses that are reshaping what healthy eating looks like in real life. He is the CEO of Naturamarket, a digital-first retail marketplace making clean, specialty foods more accessible. And he's also the co-founder and CEO of Revive Superfoods, a brand delivering pre-portioned smoothies and meals designed to fit to actual human schedules. Before all that, Yousuf was on a very different path, working in banking and private equity until a personal health shift and a simple idea within his own family sparked the beginning of what would become a pair of high-growth consumer brands. Today, he's running companies that sit at the intersection of wellness, technology, and modern retail, navigating inventory challenges, scaling fulfillment, empowering teams, and building customer experiences that keep people coming back. Yousuf's journey inspires some fascinating questions. How do you build e-commerce businesses that help people live healthier without asking them to overhaul their lives? What does it take to turn a personal insight into a scalable model? And how do you maintain your purpose and your sanity while growing two brands in one of the most competitive consumer categories? On that note, Yousuf, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Maybe kicking it off right at the beginning, you started your career in banking and private equity and then went through this like a personal health shift around that time. Can you tell us more about that, and how did that influence the idea that would go on to become Revive Superfoods?
Yeah, so I think just like everybody listening, I think everybody strives to lead a relatively healthy lifestyle. I think it becomes more and more difficult with the options that exist out there. We hear it every day as you advance in your career and things get more demanding, and you tend to forget a little bit about what you're putting in your body. So I was a victim of that. And I sort of hit a snag in 2016 when I was in my mid-30s and just thinking about, well, where does my career go from here? I was pretty active in my 20s, played a lot of sports and things like that. But as my corporate job kind of took over, my health took a little bit of a hit. So I really tried to focus in on how I could live a healthy lifestyle and how I could actually be a part of that. And that led to more of a view of how do I actually participate in a career that's related to not only consuming healthy products, but selling them. And that's the first steps of how Revive and Natura and all these healthy food businesses was created.
Yeah, and your story, I mean, you were a busy professional, and certainly this would be appealing to a lot of busy professionals, but it's not just for busy professionals. I mean, this appeals to families and just health-focused consumers in general, right?
Yeah, it appeals to people who just want to have a healthy lifestyle. It can include families, kids, people who want sort of to envelop themselves in a healthy lifestyle from beginning to end. And it's hard to find snacks in particular that are healthy, that are not super processed. And so that was something that I was keying in on. But it did really start with the smoothies, and smoothies tends to be the easiest way to find something that's healthy to consume and easy to prepare, but not readily accessible all the time. So that was sort of the main focus of what I was looking for.
Yeah, and Revive Superfoods offers pre-portioned dietitian designed smoothies and meals, which of course sounds fantastic. What you just mentioned, was that the gap in the market that you felt wasn't being filled?
I was still in my early investment banking years in the mid 2010s. Had just graduated and got married and sort of was in the beginning of my career. So a lot of how I approached whether being involved in a business, investing in one, or advising on them was related to some sort of profit-making venture. And we saw a lot of examples in the mid 2010s related to this growth in meal kit companies. But there was a little gap in this area around smoothie deliveries, which was taking off in the US. And so it was very opportunistic from my side. I was one of the first to kind of look at that alongside some of my family members and launch something that we thought could work. So it came from a more of a business opportunistic perspective, combining with the need of let's live healthier to kind of create this.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because we've had other guests on the show who from different industries who've talked about that same moment of identifying a gap in the market and a problem that they felt that they could solve. You described your perspective of being a CEO as empowering teams and focusing on the big picture. What did that look like in the early years of Revive? I read somewhere that at one point you were dealing with 600 emails a day, which is just astounding. And especially at that age, you're starting a venture. What was that like?
It was extremely difficult. I would say it's great to always start a business or roll up your sleeves on a business, knowing that you have good mentors around you. Those first few years were extremely difficult. And I made a ton of mistakes, including trying to figure out everything on my own, which was ambitious. And if you have the passion to do it, it's admirable, but can also be silly at times. And so that's where the 600 emails a day kind of came in. And it was quite a learning curve. Now, we were growing very quickly, so it was rewarding at the same time. But in hindsight, looking back now as an e-commerce operator, there's a very specific way that I've now learned how to operate these businesses, and that's to delegate where you should and know where your spots of benefit are and try to make sure that the team around you could lead things where they should as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting trade-off because on the one hand, that youthful exuberance and energy helps you deal with especially the early stages, but at the same time, you don't have that experience that just comes with age and with time. Now, you went through a period with Revive where you had to work entirely remotely. And it's not that long after you started Revive, right? I believe several years into that venture. How did remote work impact the way your team scaled? Because I think you've mentioned it even improved efficiency. I'm sure many leaders and entrepreneurs have had different experiences and perspectives on the impact that remote work has had on growing their business. What was your ultimate experience and view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting time in that everybody who was part of some sort of work-related function went through a big change during COVID. We actually saw as an e-commerce company, much like many others in the industry, had a huge spike in sales because everybody was at home. And we had to now manage this business that we had built from the ground up was growing now even more quicker and had to manage people not working in an office setting for a period of time. I could tell you it was actually an enlightening experience because a lot of people really showed their true colors in a way. So it was actually, from a business perspective, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to lose productivity, but it was more of an optimization exercise in that there were some areas we actually saw a lot of productivity growth without the distractions of being in the office and water cooler politics kind of stuff, but more so delegating in specific areas of the business here or internationally that we thought could be done more productively. And it actually helped the business generally on a productive level.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that it sounds like for you, it was a way to optimize the business and look at how can we be running things more efficiently, right? Which is a very productive way, I think, of taking an event like that and using it for good, for positive. Moving on to Natura. And so running Revive for some years, several years ago, opportunity presents itself to acquire Natura. How did that opportunity come about? And what really excited you about the e-commerce side of wellness retail?
Yeah, so I mean, the full story on Revive from when it was founded in 2018 was it experienced some very good growth in Canada as a smoothie delivery option for Canadians. And then we expanded into the US in 2019. In COVID, we had some pretty significant growth. But then after COVID, everything on the e-commerce side for all companies actually leveled off quite significantly. And you can see that in all of the stories of companies that even couldn't survive that period because there was such a steep reduction in sales for e-commerce in general. And the best companies that survived that period were ones that had good financial discipline. And so that's where I kind of relied on less of my product operation expertise, but more so my banking background and financial management to kind of weather the storm. And it did mean that we had to make some significant cuts. But again, being in the trenches with your team, whether it's to build a business or to handle it during difficult periods, is really what defined success for us. And what we realized at the end of that journey was, well, Revive was such a fantastic experience for us, where we essentially built an excellent infrastructure of e-commerce, and that's a big word, e-commerce, but e-commerce related operations, whether that's marketing, technology, fulfillment, distribution, because we were in the trenches, knew how to operate all of those things very efficiently. And we had a platform now to do one of two things: double down on organic growth and introduce new products to the market, or, like I said, rely on some of my expertise in the M&A practice to acquire other companies and kind of plug them in. And so the story of Natura is actually a pretty interesting one, in that I had met with the founder of Freshii way back during COVID, and they were looking for ways to diversify outside of retail. There was a little bit of a panic period there, if you guys recall, where everybody thought stores would remain shut down for a long period of time. And that's usually what happens in markets where there's a sudden shock. There's a little bit of like, is this going to last a long time? But so it looked like it was like there was an interest in diversifying towards e-commerce. That transaction did not go through with Freshii, who was interested in buying a stake in Revive at that point. And so they actually went out and bought Naturamarket as an alternative, which is sort of a full circle story, in that Freshii was eventually sold to another company called Foodtastic that is a retail operator. And so the e-commerce asset ended up becoming the exclusion, and I ended up having the opportunity to scoop it up. Now, it wasn't like an easy win. It was a lot of work, but because of our ability to see the Natura was not profitable, and utilizing sort of some of our expertise on shipping and fulfillment and a lot of the other synergies that we were able to plug in with Revive, it became a very good transaction for us to pursue. We ended up closing the deal in 2024 and paid back the purchase price within 60 days with the changes that we implemented. So it was a highly successful transaction, and it kind of validated all those years of hard work we had put into Revive, building a good infrastructure. And now we're kind of replicating that model in different forms and really introducing a new asset class that we think is quite attractive, in that there's a lot of these e-commerce companies with great product founders. We've all seen them, but the financial operational synergies that are required to scale are sometimes not easily identified and take a long time to get there, as it took with Revive. So we were lucky with Natura. It was a lot of hard work, but we got there, and we're continuing to pursue that model for other businesses as well.
Now, you've said, and this interesting line philosophy, clean eating is hard, making it easy is rewarding. What's the backstory on that? How does Natura kind of bring that philosophy to life?
We have some really great product people involved in both businesses, particularly on the Revive side. We've built some, and I encourage anybody listening to check these smoothies out. Quick plug there, I guess. But there's a lot of great selection of smoothies that are not your typical like bananas, mangoes kind of thing, but there's actually other ingredients in there that can kind of supplement different moods that are needed for the day. There's sort of ingredients that we specialize on trying to ensure that that's created as best as possible. The key here is we're trying to get people to understand that what you consume is an input and the output is how you live your life. And so it's really important to ensure that input is something not only satisfying, but also helping you live a healthier lifestyle. And that's the theme throughout all of our businesses.
It's like you mentioned kind of staying on top of trends, which I can imagine is so critical in the e-commerce retail space, especially for your business, and especially with the younger generation of potential customers out there. How do you and your team tackle engaging customers from a content perspective and staying on top of dietary trends, which I can imagine are just changing on a daily basis?
We've done surveys at Natura, and the number one answer for the reason people shop at Natura is continuing to be dietary restrictions. So it's not only just the virality of a product or this thing looks good or tastes good. It's they need it. People want access to these things. And particularly like Canadians who live in very remote areas. We have a very big country, and it's sometimes very difficult to get products to different people in different areas, or it's very expensive and so it becomes inaccessible. And so we crack through that by leveraging all of the efficiencies we've built throughout our supply chain and making it very easy for people to access these kind of products. But dietary is such an important part of it. And these trends come and go. We see them, we monitor them. We have different tools that we've built to watch what works, what's not. And our team executes rather quickly in ensuring that we're front of line on bringing these kind of products in. The social stuff is evolved so incredibly over the last, I would say, few years, specifically with the algorithms now much more curated and fixated on the virality of things. So it was like the good mix of being able to have a partner who understands that their presence on social media can help push a product, but it's also not unhealthy and actually can be beneficial. So people gravitate towards those sort of things. And it works out as a pretty good intersection of social media, amplifying the message, and technology and efficiency of supply chain, making a business work.
On that note, how much time do you get as a CEO? Do you ever have days where you just you're tempted to just spend a day or even part of your day just either reading customer feedback or reviews or going on social media yourself and reading kind of what people are posting?
Yeah. I mean, I talked about the nature of an entrepreneur and starting a business and how you have to be willing to let go. I'm still working on that. And to this day, I spend a significant amount of time talking to customers and looking at products. It's not my core competence, and I rely on great people around me to help source the products. At shows, they call me the sample guy because I just go around eating samples. But I do have a good plug-in for understanding what trends we need to execute on. And it's the commercialization of great products and ideas that's necessary. So anybody can come up with a great idea. It's, are you willing to roll up your sleeves and execute it and bring it to life? And is it marketable? Meaning, are people actually going to pay what you're asking them to pay for something in exchange for that good? And so that transaction needs to be sensible, which is sort of where I can help the most.
Well, I was going to say, if you're ever looking for a sampler, I know myself, and I'm sure lots of listeners would be very happy to sign up for that job. That I think is everyone's dream job. Scaling, Yousuf, an online retailer comes with, I'm sure, so much supply chain complexity, inventory risk, customer experience expectations. What's been maybe one of the biggest operational challenges you've had to solve for? And when you think about like the key success factors in e-commerce retail, what are maybe some drivers that most people wouldn't typically think of that are actually really key to driving your growth and profitability? Because I think from the outside, one would just think, well, it's just sales, as simple as that. But I'm sure it's a lot more nuanced.
It is a lot more nuanced, but there is one key variable and metric we look at, which is the lifetime value over CAC, which is basically for every dollar you put into acquiring a customer, what is the return on that customer profile over a period of time. And it's shocking to me how many e-commerce companies are under or overutilizing that number and don't really understand how to optimize it. And so again, my background is again more on the number side, so I'm able to kind of assist with those kind of questions. But it's really actually a simple approach in terms of how you can optimize that, which is basically you need to be able to sell something that people want. That's number one. And two, it's got to have enough of a profit profile so that you can basically afford the acquisition cost of whoever is buying that product. And if they come back again and again, then you might be profitable over a period of time. And a lot of the businesses that have failed in an e-commerce kind of world weren't necessarily because their products were in any way inferior to other businesses. It was just that the optimization of that formula was not quite there. And so they would raise a lot of money or incur high amounts of debt to run up revenue, but the actual profitability metrics of a customer were eroding over time. And then when there's a blip in the market, like COVID ending, or just a snag in any sort of macro factor, those companies wouldn't survive because they would have to double down on raising more money in a downward revenue environment. So that's like a recipe for disaster that any financial manager would be able to identify. I'm very passionate about some of these subjects because I've lived through them beginning to end, but they need to be profitable. And this idea of not running a profitable business for a period of time until you can grow is a valid one, but you'd have to have deep pockets, a strong balance sheet, and ensure that you can self-finance to some extent because everybody wants a return on their investment. And if you're not able to achieve that, then the lights turn off. And so that's what I tell people in and around my circle, but also externally, is financial discipline in the growth of e-commerce companies, particularly around profits, is essential to any growth factor. And there's a cap to it. Some of these companies, they hit a cap after a certain point because you can't actually spend more on acquiring customers because it would exceed the profitability profile required from that customer. And that means you got to think of other ways to sell the product or introduce new products or cut costs. And it's just very simple after that point what you should be doing, but it might be capped out at that point. So that's generally the guiding formula we look at, LTV to CAC. I know there's like actually specific podcasts that talk about LTV to CAC because it's such an important figure for e-commerce operators. And there's a whole community of e-commerce operators that are looking for the answers to these questions because they have products that are great, but the optimization question is still something that's not talked about enough.
Well, it's fascinating insight. And it's for those of us who go on these websites and as consumers, you don't necessarily appreciate just how nuanced the dynamic is and what goes in from your side to actually source a customer and then how you look at future value of a customer. It's incredible. Now, I want to bring it back to you a little bit. And every leader, especially CEO or entrepreneur, has their personal strategies and core beliefs and practices every day to fuel themselves, to manage the stress and pressure of taking on such responsibility. I read you start your day at 6 a.m. with a workout. You've done that since the very beginning. How important are routines and best habits in helping you lead at this scale?
For me, it's really 4 buckets that I check off daily. One is faith. That really keeps me grounded and on the ball for what the actual objectives are. The second is family, is just ensuring that you have a sound group of people around you when you come back from work, or just keeping everybody happy around you is a top priority. The third is health, and your body's a car in a sense, like you need to take care of it. If you don't, it's going to erode itself. And then last is work. And I think ultimately those that go to work and feel like I'm going to go crush it today, no matter what I'm doing, is actually something to get a positive vibe. So positive attitudes, positive reinforcement, whether through routines or just understanding what is your best sort of output through those 4 functions. At the end of the day, when I sort of put my head on the pillow, I ask myself, did I achieve the maximum I can from those 4 buckets?
Well, I love that you've got those 4 buckets. Thank you for sharing that. And it's all in a way interconnected, right? As you mentioned, your physical health, how you eat impacts kind of your positivity, your mindset, how productive you are. This industry both for Revive and Natura, when you think about health, wellness, and e-commerce, obviously changing rapidly, always dynamic. What major trends do you think are going to shape the future of healthy eating and digital retail over, let's say, the next 5 years?
The main one that I'm quite excited about is technology itself and the artificial intelligence side of things, AI. I think that there's a huge change that's being undertaken right now in our industry. When you think about shopping on AI, that was one of the first things that I think a lot of these apps now are trying to introduce is how do we actually let people shop within these apps? And so we're seeing a huge tidal wave of new software coming out on the AI side with relation to e-commerce, just to make it even easier, whether it's communication with customers, finding what they need. I predict in the next 5 years that this idea of entering a homepage, going into an e-commerce website will evolve into something more curated where you just ask something what you need and it'll actually even just buy it for you. So this whole like funnel of homepage, basket building pages, and then checkout is just going to get eliminated with this idea of I'm just searching for a basket of things and talking to somebody and they build it for you and just take care of it. We're seeing, and we're going to be implementing one of the first in Canada, a sales AI help desk within the Natura and Revive websites to help people find what they're looking for quicker. And then on the back end, the AI stuff has just become incredible, whether it's demand planning for inventory, which we hear a lot from different e-commerce companies is a struggle. Financial management, I spoke about being able to automate some of those CFO functions is quite critical because not every company is the same. And some of those particular to-dos are not easy to identify when constructing a P&L or balance sheet or things like that. So I'm a big AI proponent, and I think there's going to be significant changes in our industry and others when it comes to buying food online.
That's such a fascinating vision. I mean, I was thinking of a scenario, let's say going on to Natura's website in future and saying, I want a granola for breakfast. I want something that's filling. I don't like anything that's too sweet. Don't like anything that has sort of fruit taste. And boom, you get your curated recommendations without having to browse yourself and read each one. Very fascinating. Not to put you on the spot, but you foresee a day where from a brick and mortar perspective, it becomes very rare for individuals in society to buy their food in person. I mean, grocery stores have been around for forever, but could you ever see a point where food itself becomes essentially an online experience?
I don't actually. I think there's always going to be a good combination of the two. And I'm a probably living example of that. For probably over the last year, I haven't gone to the grocery store. I've just been ordering Instacart. But the person who's picking the fruit is picking whatever's there. And there's another feeling to actually holding the orange or apple and seeing it and feeling it and putting it in your cart. Those kind of feelings I don't think will ever go away unless there's a high level of quality and trust in whoever's doing that.
Now, you've touched on a few of them, but looking ahead for Revive and Natura, what exciting projects or innovations are on the horizon, and where and how can anyone listening take a look to explore the Revive and Natura offering and catalog for themselves?
Yeah, you can check out our website, Naturamarket.ca, which has a trending section right on the homepage, and it's updated daily with all the new and trending products. We get a lot of people who are really happy with the accessibility of those products. We're very proud of how we've kind of made those numbers work. It's very difficult, a tight margin business. It's very competitive in some respects, but we work really hard to try to ensure that those products are curated as best as possible for our customers. And the same for Revive. We've done a great job introducing a smoothie every quarter that we think is up to date with market trends and new kind of ideas, and really meets what people are looking for in terms of some of their health habits, but also affordable and can kind of be used in different levels of consumption and frequency. What I lean more towards in terms of excitement with regards to our sort of umbrella of companies is, again, utilizing our infrastructure. I think we've done an incredible job of becoming sort of the top tier, efficient e-commerce platform in Canada with a focus on food and specialty and frozen. And we have, like I said, other companies that we brought into the fold on an equity level that has benefited us in terms of service-related revenue and equity participation. And we're continuing to seek out other businesses that may fit into that fold. And again, all we're trying to do is just help founders fast forward a lot of the pain that we went through in those early days of Revive by bringing their ideas to life and attracting growth and scale at a very high level.
Well, it's really exciting to hear about the future of Natura and Revive. And this brings us to the final topic and something that we pose to every guest on the show. As you know, Yousuf, growing the good is our foundational theme on the show and the very purpose that we're driven by at BMO, how we engage with each other, our customers, and the communities that we're so proud to be a part of every day. So with that said, Yousuf Soliman, what does growing the good mean to you?
I think it's an excellent name for the podcast. I love what the theme is and what's the intention behind it. For me, growing the good is essentially encapsulating of everything that we talked about in terms of living a better lifestyle through healthy food consumption and being productive in ways that you satisfy what your goals are. And everybody has different goals. The inputs matter, and growing that is an essential part of whatever output you seek. And so at Revive, Natura, and all of our other companies, growing those businesses, being a participant in people's healthier lifestyles while doing it efficiently and in a more accessible fashion is really what we want to achieve. And we're well on our way to building a much larger platform right now because of those goals being achieved. And I want to take a moment and thank the entire BMO team for their professionalism and their excellent service throughout assisting us on this journey. I think it's a top tier bank. And for anybody listening on the e-commerce side, I think you're in great hands with BMO. And so having the right partners throughout that journey is an essential part of achieving the success you want. So good is a big word. It comes in all shapes, fashions, and forms on every part of the journey. But it should start with yourself and really reflecting on how you live your life. And if we're a small part of that, we've done our job.
Well, we're all really looking forward to seeing what the future has for Revive and Natura. Yousuf, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Journeys to Growing the Good on Markets Plus. Thank you as well to our listeners. And until next time, I'm your host, Issam Majeed.
Thanks for listening. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. For more episodes, visit bmocm.com/marketsplus.
The views expressed here are those of the participants and may not necessarily represent those of BMO Capital Markets, its affiliates, or subsidiaries.
For BMO disclosures, please visit bmocm.com/podcast/disclaimer.